Picture this. It's February 1959. Deep in the remote Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, 9 incredibly experienced hikers are on the expedition of a lifetime. They never came back. What a search party found weeks later was a scene so bizarre, so terrifying, it has become one of the most persistent and chilling mysteries of the entire 20th century.
So when the official Soviet investigation just shuts the case down a few months later, this is what they come up with. The cause of death? A compelling natural force. I mean, what does that even mean? It was so vague, so unsatisfying, and honestly, pretty cryptic. That single phrase didn't solve anything. It basically cemented the incident in legend and kicked off decades of wild speculation.
And that's the big question, isn't it? That's what we're going to dig into today. For more than 60 years, everyone from scientists to conspiracy theorists has tried to figure it out. What could have possibly happened to those 9 hikers on that frozen, desolate mountainside? Okay, so to even begin to unpack what went down, you have to understand who these people were. Because it's their skill, their expertise, that makes what happened to them so completely and utterly baffling. I mean, just look at this roster. This was a crew of brilliant young people, engineers, physicists, led by the 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. They were on what was called a Category 3 expedition, which was the highest, most difficult rating you could get in the Soviet Union. So yeah, these weren't some weekend warriors. These were seasoned, tough, and incredibly capable mountaineers. Finally, on February 26th, a search party locates their camp. And what they find? Well, it doesn't provide any answers. Instead, it just opens up this Pandora's box of bewildering questions that seem to defy all logic.
The details here are just bone-chilling. The tent was sliced open, but from the inside. That suggests they were desperate to get out. But why? Why would 9 expert hikers suddenly flee into minus 30-degree weather, leaving all their warm clothes, their boots, and all their gear behind? And here's the kicker. The footprints leading away from the tent showed they were just walking, not running for their lives in a panic. It's a total contradiction.
And as the bodies started turning up over the next few weeks and months, the mystery basically splits into 2 completely different stories. The first group of 5, found near a big cedar tree and on the slope heading back toward the tent, they all died of hypothermia. Tragic, for sure, but it makes sense in those conditions. But the last 4 hikers, found months later buried deep in a ravine, they died from something far, far more violent. And this right here is the absolute heart of the mystery. We're talking devastating internal injuries. 2 of the hikers had chests that were completely crushed, multiple ribs broken. Another had a massive skull fracture. Now, investigators eventually figured out the missing soft tissue was likely just natural decay and scavengers. But the internal trauma? That was something else entirely.
You know, the medical examiner's conclusion was just mind-blowing. He basically said that the force required to cause these injuries was enormous, comparable to getting hit by a car. But, and this is the crazy part, there were no external bruises, no cuts, no signs of a fight. So how do you shatter someone's ribs without leaving a single mark on their skin? This one forensic finding blew the door wide open for all kinds of speculation.
So when you've got evidence this bizarre, this contradictory, it's really no wonder that the official line of a compelling natural force just didn't cut it for anyone. For the next 60 years, this information vacuum was filled with a storm of theories, ranging from the somewhat plausible to the completely paranormal. And people really tried to connect the dots. Those car crash injuries made some people think of secret military weapons tests, maybe something like parachute mines that detonate in midair. Then you've got reports of strange orange spheres in the sky around that time, which of course fueled all the UFO theories. People speculated about everything from a KGB hit gone wrong to an attack by local tribes, though that was pretty quickly ruled out. For decades, these were just stories, just attempts to find a narrative that could somehow fit these impossible facts.
Now, one piece of evidence that always gets brought up is the radiation found on some of their clothes. On one sweater, the levels were almost 100 times higher than normal background radiation. But here's the thing. Investigators eventually concluded it just wasn't enough to be lethal. The most likely source was just contamination from their jobs, since a couple of the hikers had worked in the nuclear industry. It was another weird clue for sure, but it wasn't the smoking gun everyone was hoping for.
So for decades, the case was just stuck, frozen in speculation. But lately, modern science and computer modeling have started to chip away at the ice, finding the signal in all that noise, and providing a coherent, evidence-based theory that finally seems to fit all the bizarre pieces of the puzzle together.
Okay, so the top scientific theory today is something called a slab avalanche.
Now, this isn't what you typically picture when you think avalanche. It's not some huge, powdery cloud roaring down a mountain. It's a very specific, pretty rare event where a dense, heavy slab of packed snow breaks free and slides. And this is so important because it can happen on a fairly gentle slope, just like the one where they camped, and it doesn't leave behind the massive pile of debris that searchers would have expected to find.
So here's how scientists think it all went down. First, the hikers cut into the snowpack to shelter their tent from the wind, but in doing so, they unknowingly destabilized the slope right above them. Then, overnight, these powerful, heavy winds piled up a ton of snow just above their tent. Eventually, a weak layer deep inside the snowpack gave way, and a small, but incredibly dense and heavy, slab of snow slid down right onto the tent where they were sleeping.
And this is the real aha moment. This is what finally connects the avalanche to those impossible injuries. Researchers use advanced computer models to simulate the event. And believe it or not, they use the same animation technology that Disney developed for the movie Frozen to create realistic snow. And their models showed that a heavy slab of snow hitting people who are lying down on a hard surface, like the skis they'd packed under the tent floor, would inflict exactly the kind of massive, internal, bone-crushing trauma seen in the victims, all without causing any major external bruises. It finally solved the medical examiner's paradox.
Okay, so now that we have this key piece of the puzzle, we can finally reconstruct the final harrowing hours of the Dyatlov group and see how one single natural event kicked off a fatal chain reaction.
So the timeline probably looked something like this. Late at night, the slab of snow hits the tent. It instantly injures several of them. That's our car crash trauma. Fearing a much bigger, more catastrophic avalanche is coming any second, they make a decision. Get out now. They cut their way out and make an orderly, calm retreat to the tree line. The healthiest members then try to get back to the tent for supplies, but they freeze to death on the way. And the last survivors, huddled together in a snow den they dug in a ravine to protect the injured, are killed when the den collapses under more snow. Suddenly, every strange clue, the cut tent, the lack of gear, the two kinds of deaths, it all just clicks into place.
So in the end, that compelling natural force the Soviets talked about, it wasn't a UFO, a Yeti, or a secret weapon. It was a perfect storm, a small human error in picking a campsite, combined with exactly the right or wrong weather conditions that triggered a rare kind of avalanche. That led to a cascade of desperate but logical human decisions that unfortunately turned out to be fatal. And that really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? The solution to Dyatlov Pass is arguably more chilling than any conspiracy theory because it was real. It was just a tragic accident. And it makes you wonder how many other great mysteries that we blame on something sinister or supernatural are actually just complex, tragic chain reactions, and we're only now developing the scientific tools to finally understand them.